Is there such a thing as a child born with low self-esteem? And the answer unequivocally is no. The entire concept of not having confidence in yourself is a man-made creation that is shaped by and projected by human beings upon other human beings. You know why? Because every human being was created in the divine image. We are a piece of God in one way or another. However you interpret that philosophically. Tselem Elokim. And as such, just as the divine is utter value, so you have something that by your birthright is absolutely yours, indispensable. So if someone was truly in touch with that so-called DNA, that spiritual code that shapes them, why would they be afraid of anything in this world? Why would they have any lack of self-esteem? You have something that no one can take away from you because no one gave it to you. God, by creating you and sending your soul to this earth, made a declaration of a vote of confidence in you and in your soul that I'm sending you to this earth as my messenger to accomplish something that only you can accomplish. Imagine a person really, really knows that, not just intellectually, not just cerebrally, in their heart. Would there be anything that should faze you? No. So children are born with that inherent and innate sense of self-esteem. However, here's the big however. God made it a little more complicated. He gave children to be protected by mortals and human beings who may not have that self-esteem any longer, who may have their own insecurities and their own low self-confidence. And they project that and will shape the child in their image. So in a sense, if you really want to really put it in very stark terms, parents often take a pure soul that has everything it needs, and instead of cultivating it and nurturing it and giving it more confidence and validating, so-called, its inner sense of self, undermine and destroy, I can't say destroy, but definitely wound that innate self-confidence. So essentially, that's really the story of life. A soul, by virtue of its nature, has everything it needs to deal with the challenges of life. But the soul goes undercover, and it is ultimately parents, and then educators, and then society that can, on one hand, cultivate the soul's confidence and turn it into a very powerful force, or, as is in most cases, begin weakening a person's own confidence in themselves by projecting your own weaknesses, your own critiques, your own sense of low self-image, and ultimately shape a child, and their soul will go undercover, and what emerges is a human being searching for purpose, searching for significance. Now, so not to be overly simplistic, but this essentially is the story of life. I mean, if you want to put it in biblical terms, everyone begins in the Garden of Eden, a pure Garden of Eden, where there are no distractions. And then we all have the moment in our lives on a microcosmic level when we eat from the tree of knowledge. Basically, when we lose our innocence. Or I would put it maybe in more practical, in more simplest terms, when we first become jaded. When the first time we lie, for example. Children by nature do not lie. That's why parents have to always tell their children not to tell anyone what's happening in their homes, because children just say, what do they see? When do they learn to lie? When do they learn? Where do we learn duplicity from? We learn it from our parents. We learn it from our adults around us, and we suddenly see. First, it disturbs a child, actually. You know, there's studies that show when a child sees the first time someone say something, and they know clearly it's not true, the child is shaken by it, because it's being said by someone they care for and love, and at the same time they know this is not true. But what usually happens after repeated, the child adjusts and says, something must be wrong with me. So they defer, which is again the great crime, when people begin to change and adjust their own standards because they think that what they're hearing from someone else is what they must know better. And this is the severe extreme cases. This is where you really have the damage done by the silence that comes after a crime. What they say in psychological language, they say the silence is worse than the rape. You know, it's one thing a crime is perpetrated. Okay, but then you can cry out and say, this was a crime and I want justice. But if you're told nothing happened, or it wasn't a crime, you imagined it, that in many ways psychologically, and this has been proven again and again, is far more damaging. Because you can't even trust your own instincts. And you don't know, have I really been hurt? I've been telling by everybody that I wasn't hurt, nothing happened. This is, as I said, one of the most devastating moments in a person's life, when a trauma is not allowed to be expressed. It's like, you can't cry. Only babies cry. As some unhealthy, dysfunctional parents can tell a child who wants to cry and deserves to cry. And there are people that learn from that the crying is not what you do. And then they begin to lie. And they begin to live a second life. No, everything, how are things? Great, everything is great. You hear this line all the time. When things are really not great. And you learn to develop two personalities, one that's crying inside and gets buried deeper and deeper under layers and crusts of armor and all kinds of other stuff. You develop this whole new sophisticated defense mechanisms. No, I'm fine. Where do you see it most? In the dating process, when you have to deal with real relationships. Because then, it's one thing, you're walking around the streets, fine, you're cool. But when you have to deal with a vulnerable situation, you're suddenly looking for someone to marry. You're looking for a soulmate. And there you can't that's where you see all this comes out. People start testing each other, trust issues, commitment issues. The list goes on. Unfortunately, I don't have to elaborate on this part of the symptoms because this is something everybody is familiar with. But where does it all come from? You weren't born that way. That's the key. And it's one of the most tremendous and important lessons in Torah is to know you were not born what you see right now in the mirror with all the flaws and so on. That's not what you were born. You were not born that way. As a matter of fact, the Talmud puts it this way. In your mother's womb, you were taught the entire Torah. That's a pretty big statement if you think about it. The entire Torah. Which, rest assured, in your mother's womb, the way you were taught Torah is better than any yeshiva that you'll ever go to. And free tuition for that matter. No, you don't even have to pay for it. And after that, it's all downhill, as they say. You learn the entire Torah. And we'll get in a moment, what does that mean exactly? And then the Talmud continues and says at moment of birth, when the child emerges, the angel comes, the Satre al Piv, makes like shh, which is why they say we have a cleft under my mustache here. Somebody wants to demonstrate. A little cleft on our upper lip, above our upper lip. And that's like the shh. That's like engraved inside of our thing, that Meshakin, that the angel makes us forget the entire Torah. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons we have a Shalom Zocher, why Friday night after the birth, the first Friday night after the birth of a child, a male child, Shalom Zocher is meant to be consoling the child for this loss of entire knowledge of Torah, which is another discussion, what that means exactly. And what about a woman? Women also study Torah and are responsible for the Torah that's connected to their laws, etc. But that's, again, another discussion. But the big question is, why teach someone the entire Torah and make them forget? So the Baal HaTanya writes a beautiful answer in the Likutei Torah. He says that, no, we're not made to forget. Our consciousness forgets, but our unconscious never forgets. It's like downloaded into your hard drive. And when you're really learning properly later, you're just reviving and reconnecting. That's called resonance. Like sometimes you say, I know that truth somewhere, I heard it somewhere, I can't quite place it. So you're actually really being given empowered in those 9 months to have a sense of what is right and true. And then, the way God wants the plan is that He conceals it. And now it's our effort and our study and our work is regaining. So in Jewish thought, it's not that you're reclaiming your heritage. You're not getting something that's new, which makes the job far easier. So you're not born as a clean slate. Consciously, it's a clean slate, but you're born with a lot of strength. Some interpret the Gemara that says Mashbiyanese, that a child before it's born, Mashbiyanese, they make it take an oath, an oath that says what? Tihi tzaddik v'al tihi rasha. You should be a tzaddik and not a wicked person. So mashbiyan is sometimes interpreted from the word also mazbiyan, which means v'savota. You're also sated, you're also fed, you're nourished. So a shvuah is not just an oath, it's also empowerment. So we come into this world empowered. God will not ask us to do something we cannot accomplish. We're not only empowered, we're given a soul, as I said, created in the divine image. That's a tremendous thing. So we have an image. We have a so-called, the template upon birth is not just neutral, it's healthy. And it has natural self-esteem because a soul, why would a soul not have self-esteem? A soul is aware of its purpose. It's aware that it is God's agent on this earth and before coming to this earth. But the soul then is encrusted and embedded inside of a body. And there it's concealed and hidden and also given to the control and the stewardship of our parents and our educators and adults. Now you may wonder, why would God do such a cruel thing? Why take such a pure soul that has everything it needs and dump it into and give it to under the protection of mortal human beings? Because even the best parents are still not going to teach the Torah as an angel does inside the mother's womb. So even the best parents cannot do a perfect job. So why do that? And especially if the parents are not such great parents, which is unfortunately very often the case. Dysfunctional, even abusive, absentee, the whole list. So this gets into the purpose of existence itself, why God put us in this world. The answer is because the soul in heaven doesn't have any challenges. It's the challenges in this world that can bring the best out of us. And it's a vote of confidence, actually. And God is saying, I am entrusting my world and my children to you. It's essentially what God says to new parents. And actually not even new parents, their entire life. These are not your souls, these are not your children, these are my children. But I'm entrusting them to you. We're partners. Father, Mother, and God, 3 partners. And I'm entrusting my soul into a body that you gave birth to for you to protect, nurture, cultivate, and help discover, not only not undermine, but help validate and confirm its natural birthright, which is the self-esteem that every human being has by nature. That's essentially what God is saying to a parent. Now think of it this way. Imagine every parent was aware of this. And God came personally to you as a parent and said, listen, you're going to be giving birth to a child in a few months. And let me tell you, this is my soul I'm giving to you to entrust. Well, this is exactly what the Torah tells us God says, except God gives us free will. So you don't hear the voice so loudly. But if you pay attention, that's exactly what it is. It's a gift. Anyone that's a parent knows that a child is a gift. It's a miracle. There's no way that human beings could create a life like that. We forget pretty quickly and we take it for granted. But the moment of birth, you show me a parent, I don't care what they call themselves, atheists, agnostic, believers, non-believers, there's no one that saw the miracle of birth, especially the early stages, that can believe their eyes. That's suddenly out of what? Where did this thing come from, this child? So it's a gift from God, and God is saying, I'm entrusting you, but I also give you free will. You can take it and mess it up. And that's the risk. You can say God is a great risk taker, a gambler, who took a risk by creating a universe, an agnostic universe, a universe where we can easily choose to ignore these gifts and blessings and believe, hey, you know what, I'm in control, or I own, and so on. Or you can be wise and understand with humility why you're here, and that everything given to you is a blessing and a gift. And even if you do your effort, yes, you can get credit for your effort, but as they say in the Talmud, has a beautiful expression, Tivusa l'shakya, chamra l'mora, tivusa l'shakya. The wine belongs to the owner, but you say thank you to the waiter. So we're waiters, but the wine is not ours. Life is not ours. The earth is not ours. Existence is not ours. We are waiters. We're agents that either protect and cherish and help cultivate and actualize the great potential of life, or God forbid the opposite. That's our choice. So in essence, every one of us has born natural self-esteem. Think of the tragedy, the crime of parents and community and education that not only doesn't cultivate it, but actually undermines it. Now, to truth be told, not every parent knows they're doing that. They're just succumbing to their own whims or resorting to their own weak skills, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Look, if indeed Adam and Eve were the first human beings, and they had all the self-esteem in the world, the question is, where did it go wrong? So the Torah says, when they ate from the tree of knowledge and they became absorbed with themselves, instead of with their higher purpose and calling, that's where it started falling. Everything, the fall of man, as they say. And that from there became the dysfunctional parent. After that, parents began to project their own stuff onto their children. And here we are, thousands of years later. But not all is lost, because once we're aware of this, we can do something about it. So you may wonder, where's all this into in this week's chapter? You may think I made a mistake. I'm talking about the first chapter of Genesis. We're now in the first chapter of Exodus. But actually there's a big parallel between these first two chapters. The first chapter of Bereshis, of Genesis, and the first chapter of Shemais. Because here too, we experience a birthing, just like in Genesis. But this birthing is coming with a lot of different circumstances. If Genesis, which is Chumash Bereshis, is the beginning of the human story in the context of a pure paradise, Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, and how human beings lose touch with their identities. Ayeka, as God says to Adam, shall soon elaborate on, where are you? So you can say the book of Shemais is the consequences of that. Because what does this story begin here? How human beings, this is the first documented, you can say documented discrimination of one nation enslaving another. So all of history where human beings have subjugated others, this is probably the first, not probably, I would say definitely the first documented episode of an entire nation institutionally discriminating and enslaving another nation. Unfortunately, it happened many times afterwards. So there's great lessons that can be learned from this episode. What do we have? The story begins. The Egyptians, after Joseph dies, suddenly forget conveniently everything that happened. And Vayokam el Chodesh, there's a new leader in town. Two opinions, whether he was a new leader or he decided to become new and forget the favors that Joseph and his brothers and the Jewish people did for him. But either way, he feels threatened by these Jews, these foreigners. Literally the story of all anti-Semitism. You could read this, it sounds like Hitler's Mein Kampf. He became threatened by the Jews' proliferation, that soon they'll take over and they'll control it all. Haman said this, Hitler said it, all the Yamach Shemai, may their names be erased, all our enemies, one way or other, all taken straight out of this biblical story here. And they indeed figure out, they figure out all kinds of mischievous, sly, shrewd ways to enslave the people. And begins the beginning of the hardships of 210 years. I know it's all documented in one chapter, but it's a 210-year period that the Jews were enslaved. Hard labor, genocide, murder, no due process, I should say, etc., etc. And then, of course, the story continues how Moses, the Redeemer, is born, and how finally God chooses him to send him to go redeem the Jewish people from this bondage. There are thousands and thousands of lessons. One of the most popular stories, been made popular in Hollywood, the Ten Commandments, Prince of Egypt. Now there's a new book, a new movie out, Exodus and something, whatever it's called, another recent film. It still lives on in the annals of modern culture because they capture the essential themes of life. Human injustice to another, redemption, slavery, bondage, it's psychological lessons, historical lessons, the list goes on. I want to touch upon one or two things. Obviously, can't cover every lesson. There's so many lessons in this. But one lesson in regarding to our personal resilience and our personal self-esteem. Because here's the real question. When Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, it's a big question. How did they suddenly take for granted their gifts and lose sight of God's blessing to them? They did not have challenges. I mean, there was a serpent who definitely seduced and tempted them. But there were no suffering going on. They were not in difficult situation, and yet they fell. Here, you have the opposite story. Here, human beings, many of them born into slavery, and what happens to them? Here's a good study, and going back to what I said earlier, what does suffering do to a people? And here you have the secret also to Jewish survival. There's one verse, more than one, but one particular one that really captures it. Right early in the chapter, where he says the following. It's just such a tremendous verse. Think about it. You could live your whole life just with this mantra. So he says, this is Shemais, Exodus 1, to give you exact verse, 1:12. Okay? Exodus 1:12. Remember this verse. It'll help you through your life. So it's talking about their affliction. And then the Torah says suddenly, but as much as they were afflicted, the Jews, in direct proportion to their affliction, they proliferated and they flourished. Interesting statement. Many self-help and healing systems today use words like, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. You know, that the only way out is through. I'm just using bumper stickers, cliches of the 21st century. That even though pain and suffering is very difficult, but if you see it through, you become a greater person. This is a key to all healing. That healing isn't just forgetting the past, it's growing through the past and sometimes becoming much stronger. There's a statement in the Talmud that says, Zayis, an olive, does not produce oil until you press it. Or in Eleanor Roosevelt's, and I'm mixing here Torah, Lahavdil, and others, Eleanor Roosevelt said, that's what they say, that a woman is like a tea bag. You don't know how strong she is until you put her into hot water. So there you go, a juxtaposition of 20th and 21st century cliches and Torah's statement here. And it's all a similar theme. But here's maybe the first original of them all. That as they were afflicted, in direct proportion, they flourished or thrived and proliferated, however you translate, which means not only did they survive. Survive would mean they didn't get hurt, they came out unscathed. This doesn't mean unscathed. This means they became greater and stronger. That's a very powerful statement. How could they become stronger and greater through pain and suffering? You could say, you know what, they had strong souls, they had faith, they had trust in God, they held on to their values and beliefs, so nothing could shake them. You know, like think of a tree with a very strong, deep roots, or a ship that's very powerfully built, so a storm comes, the storm can destroy other weaker trees that have weaker roots, but not a tree with deep roots. That makes sense. But does the storm make the tree stronger? Does the storm make the tree stronger? Not necessarily. And here it says that. The answer is, my friend, based on what I said before, because they didn't come in neutral. They came in with strong souls. They were born that way. And when you're in touch with your soul, and then a storm comes, and any pain and suffering comes, what does it do? Not only can you survive it, you use it to your advantage, and it ultimately fuels and makes you grow greater. You know, you see this sometimes in science fiction, superhero comic books or so on, these type of superheroes that are able to absorb someone's energy and make them stronger. Actually, martial arts is built very much in the Oriental martial arts, as opposed to Western fighting. Western fighting is about your punch, like boxing. Your stronger punch, stronger firepower. But then there's a whole other theory in fighting. You let the other person feed your energy, where you really learn to maneuver and use their strength against themselves. So a lot of our martial arts is based on maneuvering as opposed to pure firepower. Let someone else use their strength. They give the example for in baseball. If you're familiar with baseball, when you get a fastball is the fastest ball that a pitcher can throw. An off-speed pitch, or what is the slowest pitch called? Not a screwball, no, a changeup. Or, balls that are thrown very slowly. The fastest a fastball is that they put the spin on it in a way that it speeds up as it goes. But fastball, on one hand, will strike out many players, but good batters use a fastball. That's the way you hit the home runs. Because you're using the speed that's being thrown at you, you don't have to hit it that hard. You just have to use that energy that's already been given to you, and suddenly becomes a liability becomes an asset. This is just an example. Psychologically, this is very much true. This is the case where you see people who are very good at psychological warfare will use the fears and the insecurities of the other side against them. So you don't have to even develop your own thing. You just let the other person completely waste themselves. Or I'll give you an example. I'm not so proud of this example. It's one of my lesser proud moments. But when I was a camper in summer camp, so in our bunk, not my actual bunk, where we all were, the few bunks were in one building. There was one very arrogant young man who came, and he was like, really rubbed everybody the wrong way, including me. And but he was considered an excellent chess player, like a brilliant chess player. Everybody knew he had like a name. He had won some awards, whatever, some contests, some champions, what do they call them? some competitions. So I decided to put him in his place, which everybody, of course, would be happy to see, because he was like this very cocky, arrogant, immature guy, but he was smart. So first I psyched him out that I'm like a grandmaster in chess, which I know how to play decently, but I can't say I'm definitely not as good as him, that I can tell you. But I started working on him. I remember by lunch I said to him, "You know how to play chess? Have you ever really played a good player?" And I started this whole psych job. After a few days, he was furious at me. He said to me, "Okay, let's play." And he was convinced at that point that I must be who knows what, because I had led him on to think that. So he thought I was the best player, that so on. So you had to see. I won him in maybe 20 moves. Not because at all, because he thought every move I made was brilliant, when actually I was making moves that didn't make any sense, frankly. But he was overthinking, because he was convinced that I'm better than him. I had convinced him I was better than him. So when he was playing, I made a move, and he's said, he never saw that move before, and it was a stupid move. I could have been, beaten very quickly. But he read into it all kinds of theories. In chess, he started thinking through the whole thing. And by the time, he made so many mistakes that it was easy for me to win. So here's a perfect example. I used his own so-called overconfidence, and by deceiving him. As I said, it's not one of my prouder moments. I don't do this regularly, but I did it then. Everybody cheered me on, of course. He was put in his place. He was humiliated, especially the fact that I was actually he was a better player than me. So this is called psychological warfare. You're like negotiations. You come into a negotiation, you have very few cards, but the other party thinks that you have all the cards in your hand. My point that I'm saying is that you could, if you are a healthy person and you have inner strength, you could use someone else's strength, and even if they are your enemy, they can suddenly become, you can use the energy to your support, whatever, to your benefit. I mean, that's just one application. So the point is, the secret of a person having self-confidence, self-esteem has nothing to do with the circumstances of your life. The fact that some people say this all the time. "Oh, if I was blessed like that guy, I would also be a very happy person." Baloney. It's not true. There are people blessed with everything in the world, financially, good families and other things, and they take it all for granted and destroy their lives. And there are people who don't have any easy time. They're born in poverty, born with many disadvantages, with many different curveballs coming their way, and they become the most powerful, most successful people. It has nothing to do with what's delivered to you. It's what you're like. And there's no such thing as saying, if I was given this, that, and that, everything would be great. No, maybe not. Maybe you just take it all for granted, and you would become spoiled, and you would never appreciate it. So you have in the Talmud, it says that Hillel was Mechayev Aniyim, and who was Mechayev Ashirim? I forgot who it was. But there were two scholars in the Talmud. What does it mean, Mechayev Aniyim? That someone who says, "Well, I'm poor. I have no time to study Torah. I have no time to apply myself because I have to be busy making a living." So they bring a proof. Hillel was a bigger pauper than you, and still look how he excelled. And so then the wealthy ones say, "I have no time to study or do anything. I'm busy with business, and I'll make a lot of money. I'll give charity." So they bring a proof from a wealthy scholar. He was wealthy, and he also made the effort. It's about the effort, and it's about what you do with the cards that you're handed. And here's the best proof. So really, what it comes down to is not what circumstances come your way. It's true, as I mentioned, family, community, schooling will affect a person. But the bottom line is, you are born with everything you need. The question is, are you aware of it, or tragically you were made to forget, or you were convinced otherwise? It really comes down to that. So let's go back to the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve did come into a Garden of Eden. Everything was before them. God even said, "You don't have to work. You will have no childbearing pains." Everything was there. All they had to do was have spiritual life. Dedicate themselves la'avda l'shamra, to serve and to protect and preserve. And they had everything provided for them. We see that afterwards, that after they ate from the tree of knowledge, that's when man was cursed. Or you could say cause and effect. That's what man was told. From now on, b'zeis apecha techel lechem, from the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread, which means the career was born. Now you're going to have to work for your living. When it comes to Eve, she's told, you'll have to go through the pains of pregnancy and the pains of birth and so on. So what exactly happened here? Here they were given the opposite. They were given everything on a platter. And yet they blew it. Here the Jews are in Mitzrayim in the worst of times, and yet they thrive and they become greater people. Adam and Eve made their mistakes. You have people in Auschwitz who never took for granted anything and became great, refined people. It's an interesting contrast. Here, as a study, someone will say, listen, put me in a Garden of Eden, in a paradise, and I don't have to work, and I don't have to do anything. There are no pains involved with my life, no challenges. All I have to do is serve God, pray, study, grow spiritually. What do you think will happen to most of us if we were given that Garden of Eden? But that's what we think. We think if everything was given to us, things are going to work out. It's not necessarily the case. On the other hand, you can be born in hell, which is Egypt, and still come out thriving. So what is the difference? What's going on? So when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, we're told what happened was that they took for granted their own gifts. And they began to, instead of being God-conscious, they became self-conscious. That means eating from the tree of knowledge, of good and evil. They tempted themselves. And as a result, once they did that, they lost their innocence, and they were essentially expelled from the Garden of Eden. They no longer could survive there. But then there's the interesting story, and that really captures it. God comes into the Garden of Eden, the Torah says, and he looks for Adam, and Adam is hiding from God because he's ashamed of what he did. So God says, Ayeka, Adam, where are you? So of course the big question is asked, what do you mean God is asking where? God doesn't know where he is? So the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe, answers a beautiful answer. It's actually an answer that he gave in prison. Talk about difficult situations. The Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, was arrested for all kinds of trumped-up charges of counter-revolutionary activity against Mother Russia. And once the ministers and the people saw who he was, they realized this was a very pious, refined man, and they saw a major scholar and philosopher. So they came to take advantage. The ministers came to talk to him in intellectual stuff. So here's a Rebbe, a great soul, a tzaddik in a prison, in a czarist prison, having conversations with these ministers. So one minister came to see him and said to him, tell me, how do you interpret the biblical verse that God came to Adam and said, where are you? God didn't know where he was. So the Alter Rebbe gave him the classical answer, which is in Rashi, the commentary. And the minister was an educated man, so he says to the Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, Rashi's commentary I also know. I want to hear your answer. So the story goes that the Alter Rebbe, who was a tall man, formidable, stood up in full height and looked at the minister in his eyes and said the following words. He said, this is a question that God asks, not just Adam, every man and woman on earth. God asked them, where are you? I don't recognize you. What have you done with your life? I've given you gifts, given you blessings. Are you accomplishing the calling for which you were created? And then the Alter Rebbe said, so God says to the man, you're 73 years old. What have you done with your life? I've sent you here to this world. I don't recognize you. Where are you? Where do you stand? The minister was 73 years old. So they say that he was fainted when he heard that, because the Alter Rebbe said it with such piercing statement. So sometimes you're sitting near someone and you ask them and they space out and you say, where are you? Of course you know where they are. They're sitting right there, but they're present. They're not with you. You don't feel that you recognize them. They're like they wandered away somewhere. Their mind, their heart, their spirit. So the Ayeka tells you the story that Adam and Eve wandered away from their calling. And when you wander away from your calling, God asks, where are you? I don't recognize you. I sent you as a child as a pure child into a world with all the self-esteem, with all the self-good image that you deserve. And what's happened to you? Now you've become another person. You become a product, a victim, shaped by other forces, and you're no longer the person I sent. You are the same person, but I don't see it. It's not obvious. And the rest of our lives is trying to reclaim and reconnect, revisit that essential place. There are thinkers that say that a person's life is essentially trying to get back their youth, their innocence of youth within the world in which they live. The problem is that once we cross over, it's very hard because now we have new perceptions. If someone asks you, what's your self-perception? If you're very honest, you'll say, well, it's not such a positive self-perception, or it is a positive one. So it's very hard to tell you if someone really does not have a good self-image, or is not as suffers from low self-esteem. For me to come and tell you, something, you really have a lot of self-esteem. It's meaningless words. I don't feel it. So it's very nice of you to tell me that. That is why studying Hasidic thought and studying about the soul and studying about these stories helps us, because it'll have an effect on you once it resonates. When you're able to understand the language of the soul, of your own soul, and then you will recognize, yes, I do have qualities that I've maybe long ignored or long ago forgotten and not aware of. So the question is, how do you awaken that side of you that's always there, that for some reason may have gone undercover, has become dormant, has become somewhat distorted. So it's really, how do you reconnect to that place? So there are ways. Interestingly and sadly, sometimes it's through suffering. Because when a person suffers or in some way loses something, it shakes you out of your comfort zone. When you're in your comfort zone, so obviously whatever perception you have of yourself is the dominant one. When your comfort zone is shaken, one of the positives of that is, then it may expose something that is deeper inside of you that you would never have known you had, because you weren't challenged. Now again, I'm not justifying suffering, and I'm not justifying pain. No one should ever know of it. But after the fact, and everyone knows in life, we will have certain pains, and we will have certain suffering, and everyone will lose something. So you can look at loss as a validation of your own low self-esteem. Hey, you see, I really don't deserve anything. I'm really worthless, and that's why I don't have anything. That's why I lost. Or you can see a loss as a wake-up call and saying, 1 second, maybe my perception of myself is wrong. So here's the strange twist. Usually you think of someone that's arrogant as someone has an inflated sense of self. But arrogance also takes on the shape of self-hate, hating yourself. So you have sometimes conversations, you tell someone, I think you're a very valuable person. They'll say, no, I'm worthless. People abandon me. I can't find anyone that will love me. People, etc., etc. And you have this argument. And I say, no, I think you're very valuable. And the person says, no, absolutely not. And then ultimately you really want to show is that you're so arrogant. Sometimes arrogance takes the shape of overconfidence. And sometimes it takes the shape that you're convinced that you're worthless. Who are you to think you're worthless? The joke that the rabbi on Yom Kippur is banging his chest and says, I'm nobody, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. So the Gabbai, the second in command, is also banging his chest and says, I'm nobody, nobody. So some simple Jew walks in and also starts banging his chest and says, I'm nobody, nobody. So the Gabbai looks at the rabbi and says, look who thinks he's nobody. You got to be somebody to be nobody. That's called, the point I'm making here is that sometimes arrogance implodes and it takes on the shape of, I know that I'm worthless. But what do you mean, I know? How are you so convinced? Well, since when are you the final authority on whether you're valuable or not? God said, I gave you a vote of confidence and put you on this earth. What right do you have to challenge that? Who are you? You know more about yourself than God does. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons that suicide and self-mutilation or anything that's self-destructive is actually forbidden in the Torah. There's a very interesting Radbaz that says, why are you not allowed to hurt yourself? It's one thing, you're not allowed to hurt somebody else. But it's your body. No one's getting hurt if you hurt yourself. Why is that a crime? And the answer is, he says, because it's nechasav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your body is God's property. Imagine someone giving you a piece of property, a gift, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to cut off a half of it and give it back to the owner. That's not appropriate. It's not yours to give. Your life is not yours. Your life was given to you as a pekod, as a how do you say pekod? How do you say pekod? As a something to watch over. Is there a word for pekod in English? I'm talking to the Baki Bashaz back there. Not Baki in English, I understand. Pekod. Pekod means when you give something to watch someone, it's not yours. You're not giving him as a gift. You're giving to him as it's not on loan, there's a word for it. Collateral, maybe. Huh? Sometimes it's collateral. Huh? Maybe. But point being is that it's given for us to protect, not suddenly that it becomes ours. Life is not that way. Your body's not that way. Your soul is not that way. So when the Torah says, protect your health, it's not just for you to be healthy, because God gave you life. You're cherishing the sanctity of God's life, not just your own. Which is also an interesting take on it all. So the bottom line is this. Self-esteem is rooted in the soul, which is in turn rooted in the divine. And that's the real root of it all. Parents and educators and those that affect us can either confirm and validate it, nurture it. And if they nurture it, then the self-esteem comes alive. Or through their own projections and their own weaknesses and their own insecurities, can help undermine it. And then what happens is your self-esteem, like your soul, goes undercover, and the rest of your life, you're busy working on those tools, the distorted tools that you have now developed as a result of those that have shaped you. I know, it sounds pretty sad. But the good news is that it's never too late. There's no such thing as you losing your soul. You never lose your soul. The question is it like a pilot flame that remains very quiet but burning? Or is it being fanned into your consciousness? So it's a matter of getting our conscious selves connecting to our unconscious souls in that situation. So that's a way of learning how to reconnect. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's a concept in Kabbalah that says, Shvirat HaKelim, that sometimes the containers have to be shattered before they're repaired. Now, if your life is going very well and everything is connected, great. But sometimes as a result of the wounds that we've endured, and let's say the insecurities that have been projected on us, that will have an effect on us. And then we begin living our adult lives with the distortions of the things that impressed us and shaped us when we were younger. So how do you redeem yourself? Interestingly, one of the ways is through the cracks in our lives. When you recognize that those projected negative self-image is affecting you, and it hurts you, to the point maybe even it causes a loss, it even causes a break of a relationship, the healthy person, Kashayana, as he's afflicted, will grow through it and realize, something, it's not confirming that I'm worthless, it's waking me up to a reality that I would never be able to wake up to had the crack didn't happen, because the cracks, as Leonard Cohen sings, is what lets the light come through. You see this very often. They say functional addicts are far worse than dysfunctional ones. Functional addict means someone who's addicted to gambling, to sex, to drugs, to alcohol, whatever, but they've learned how to function. They hold a job, they can even masquerade, whatever they're doing, everything seems fine. Why is that worse? Because that person is in complete denial and has created a false reality. Whereas a dysfunctional addict at least knows that my life is falling apart. So I'm not wishing upon anyone in life falling apart, but sometimes the only thing that shakes you out of a dysfunctional and insecure and fears in your life is something shaking you up that opens up a new opportunity. And here's where you have the two options. When something happens that shakes your life up, you could either use it for the worst and just say, look, it confirms how worthless I am, or you could say, maybe there's a new way to look at things, because now I've been, the job I had or the past life I had has been now taken away from me. Now maybe I can find a new way to look at things. And that's where you have the second chance. The second chance to get beyond the so-called projected personality that you developed as a result of what you were shaped by, and connect to the real you that's been undercover for so long. Any really good therapy and any real good healing, it does not bring you anything. They say healers don't heal you. They get the obstacles out of the way that you can heal yourself. The healing power of the body, every doctor will tell you, is not a medical feat. The body has natural healing properties and powers. However, an infection or a weakened state or some other forces that may not allow that healing power to take hold. That's why doctors, what they have to do is stop the bleeding or mend a broken limb, But they don't fix it. Once they mend it, then they put it back in place. Then it takes a few weeks or months or whatever for it to grow back or to heal. Real healing is a natural property that belongs, it's an inherent birthright that each of us has. Doctors can facilitate it by creating an environment. It's like think about, vegetation that grows naturally from the ground. No gardener and no person can create vegetation. What you can do is weed the garden, nourish it, feed it with the right, water it, and allow the natural growth process to take place. No medicine can make a person grow. When a fetus, when conception takes place, and a cell suddenly begins to multiply, this is a natural process. However, if there's a bacteria or infection or something, you have to get rid of that to allow the natural growth to continue. And our growth through our years is very natural. No one can make you a 3-year-old into a 10-year-old with any technology in the world. And I hope they'll never develop such a technology, frankly. Because this is a process. What you could have is impediments that need to be eliminated or at least kept controlled, tamed, like you cut away the weeds so the flowers can grow. The same is when you're conveying truth to people. No one can give you truth. Truth is your own. You own truth. When I say you, I don't mean you. We all own truth. No one owns it. What you can do is help someone can help you get rid of the falsities and the deceptions and the lies in order to expose the truth that will emerge. So like an education. What's really a good education? It's not training you to do something. It's untraining you from bad methods and bad techniques, so then your natural mind can work properly or your natural heart can feel properly. Love is not taught. Everyone has love in their heart. Children have it naturally. What happens is love gets distorted because what we observe, how other people around us love, our parents and so on, so that says, oh, that's what love is? So that teaches you a love that may not really be a healthy form of love. So you have to learn how to unlearn that and re-access the unnatural love that comes within you. When the Jews were in Egypt, they were challenged in this way. And that's what happened. Their affliction brought out the best in them. It doesn't mean it was easy. It doesn't mean there weren't casualties. There was plenty of problems. But at the end of the day, like I said, put into hot water, that's when you see the power of the tea bag. That's when you see the power of the human being. We should never have to be put into hot water. We should not be challenged in this way. But we should always know that comfort zones are our greatest enemy. Because comfort zones convince us that everything is fine. I'm comfortable. Now, we will do everything to stay comfortable. That's the definition of a comfort zone. You want to be comfortable. Why should you not want to be? That's why sometimes it's a gift when someone pushes you out of your comfort zone. It should always be done in a healthy way. We shouldn't be disrupted in a rude awakening way, which is through pain or suffering. It can be done through good friends that know how to kick you in the pants in a loving way. But it's the challenges that will bring the best out of a human being, always. And that's ultimately why God did send us down to this earth, is the challenges of this agnostic world, of this hostile world, that conceals everything that's true. Conceals. Doesn't mean it's not there, it just means it's buried. And the challenge is, can you overcome it? One of the most beautiful concepts in Kabbalistic Hasidic thought is, and it's really Jewish thought, Torah thought, is that you come to this world, it's called Alma de Shikra. It's called a world that lies, a deceptive, lying world, a duplicitous world. And your mission is to not buy into the lie, to discover the inner truth that is embedded in existence. And that inner truth is Emesh Hashem, like the truth of the divine, the truth of the energy that makes everything tick. But we will be seduced and we will be tempted and we'll be distracted by everything. Materialism's hold and its tentacles are so powerful that even when you know everything I just said and you believe it, you believe there's a hand inside the glove's power and control over us is so intense that even when you know it, emotionally you're tempted by it. So imagine how insane that can be, how powerful that is. You can know that the deepest truths are far greater than anything materialistic, and yet materialism tempts us all the time. All the time. You wake up in the morning, your body tells you you're hungry. Your soul, you have to start working on. Is my soul hungry? Is it not hungry? You don't sense it naturally. Because material world, the sensory stimulation of our lives, is what dominates our lives. What you see, what you hear, what you taste, touch, and smell. All day long, that's all you're doing. You're seeing things, you're hearing things, you're tasting, touching, smelling. That's why it's so healthy, Shabbat, for example. Or other times when you shut everything down. Why don't you look inside yourself? Maybe you get beyond the world of senses. When you go there, you enter the world of the soul. And when you enter the world of the soul, you enter the world of self-confidence. Because the outside world, materialism, by definition, Oyev Kesef, Lo Yizbe Kesef. Or as the Talmud says it more graphically about sexuality, the more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. The less you feed it, the more sated it is. It's the paradox of materialism. Coca-Cola mastered the art. You think it's quenching your thirst, and it's only making you more thirsty. This is the trick of all marketing. That when you buy one, they make sure you buy a second one. They have all kinds of tricks of the trade to do that. Spirituality works the other way around because it's true. And because of its truth, it doesn't need to sell you another one. You have it once, that's it. So, much more can be said on this topic. I want to conclude with a few practical exercises, so to speak. It really comes down to two choices. You either live the life of your body, the path of your body, or the path of your soul. One is a path of insecurity, because nothing in this material world can give you security. I find it always ironic that in the financial world they call it securities, and Prudential calls it the rock, Like this is like the thing. When money, by definition, can't be secure. Because money does not last, So people keep getting more and more, and they say, if I have enough, then maybe that will last. Well, it may last, but it's not going to go with you to the next world. That's guaranteed. We know that for thousands of years in history, human beings have tried, and nobody's been able to do it. There are people who are buried with cash, with checks, with credit cards, and it helped them nothing. It deteriorated just as they did. Because this mortal world is mortal. Everything in this world erodes, ages, deteriorates, and dies. That's how it is. That's the definition of material. Matter. It has a beginning and has an end. Spirit, by definition, does not have a beginning, does not have an end. It's a soulful thing. So that's where real security comes from. It's a mathematical equation. You don't even need to have faith for this. Because something that is mortal, how could something that's insecure give you security? It would be like saying, okay, I'm going to build a foundation of my building on the same materials that I'm made of. I think Einstein and other thinkers put it this way: you cannot repair a system from within the system, because the system is part of the problem. Just like subjective people can't find objective solutions. So you need something from outside the system. In the words of Torah, it means connect to something that's beyond mortal, the immortal. You connect to something that is divine, eternal, immortal, spiritual, soulful, and you have yourself something to hold on to. So really, in truth, I can tell you right now, even though it's a pretty strong statement, this material world cannot give anybody confidence and self-esteem. It does everything to undermine it. In addition to our parents and the world in which we and the influences around us, just the material world by definition. How could something that's dying give you real security? Fine, it's true. It's not dying today. It'll take a little time. There's a very fascinating law in Jewish law. It's called Mayim Chaim. Living waters. What's Mayim Chaim? So in Jewish law, it goes like this: that when there's certain spiritual impurities, you purify through water. Not because water is like a bath or a shower, because water has spiritual me'adas haTorah. It's like knowledge. It has a certain purification power. Okay, think of it like this: think of knowledge is a purifier over ignorance. So spiritual ignorance would be the root of every spiritual disease. So what's the antidote? Spiritual knowledge. Awareness. Awareness is half the cure. Okay. Now, going into a mikveh. Mikveh is a body of what's called a ritual bath. So mikveh is made of memso. It's 40 cubits of usually rainwater. So if you go to a mikveh before Yom Kippur, or some people go every day, or for Shabbos, mikveh. There's women's mikveh. There's men's mikveh. There's a mikveh. A mikveh is still water, but it's rainwater that was collected, and it's feeding this mikveh. The mikveh, and as it stands, is still water. It's not connected to anything. So that's satisfactory, the Torah says, for certain impurities. But there's some impurities like tumas mes, or other tumas, which are touching something related to the death, or more severe, we'll call it spiritual bacteria, where you need to have what's called Mayim Chaim. What's Mayim Chaim? Spring water. It has to be connected to a live source. For example, the mikveh of the Arizal in Tzfat is a Mayim Chaim. It's a live spring water. It's usually very cold. I mean, you can heat it technically, but it's because it's live. It's connected to a spring that's underwater, like a well, a live wellspring. That's called Mayim Chaim. Now, here's the interesting, the Torah, the Talmud is always very intricate laws. So here's a question that's asked. What defines Mayim Chaim? What about a spring that dries up? Let's say you see a spring. Can you consider it to be live water? So the Talmud says, the Mishnah says, I believe in Masechta Tful Yom, Keli maybe, Zovim maybe. Anyway, it says in the Mishnah says that a spring that dries up after 7 years is not considered alive. So in other words, you have to wait. If you see a spring, you have to wait 7 years, and then it's considered to be that it's going to run forever. Why 7? Because 7 in Jewish law is a cycle of time, like a week, 7 weeks, a sabbatical, etc. Which means, essentially, think of the logic here. That means someone will say, 1 second, right now it's a live spring. What do I care if it's going to dry up tomorrow, or a year from now, or 5 years from now? So the answer is because if it's drying up tomorrow, it means it's already drying up today. It's just a matter of time. Or the words of the Rabbeinu Bechai, he says, a child from birth begins to die. Masculine, is beginning to age. Now, of course, a newborn child or even a 10-year-old child, you're not going to see any aging. You're only seeing them blossoming. But let's be honest, you can't be 100 if you weren't 10. Right? So the aging process begins as soon as you're born, because that's the nature of it, except it's not recognizable. The wrinkles and the other effects of age, which we won't go into graphic detail for those that are young in this room, are not visible. But that you can't say they're not happening. There would be no wrinkles if you didn't start wrinkling your face when you were 10 or 15 or 20. So then we hit our peak, and then we start seeing the effects of aging, the effects. But aging, by definition, is accumulative. So the interesting thing is that Judaism doesn't measure things by what you see, but measures things by what will result from it. Ezu chacham harayas haneld. Who's the wise person? The one who sees the fruits of what comes. If someone says, everything is great, and someone who's wiser says, really? I see something that tomorrow is going to bring destruction. That's the wise person. And same thing the opposite. Someone says things are terrible, and someone else says, terrible? Not really. Let's see it through. Gamzula teva. And you suddenly realize the many things that had you known then what you know now, you would not have been so down. But that's life, as Kierkegaard puts it. We can only understand our life backwards, but we have to live our life frontwards. That's how it is. So in the context of the discussion here, materialism by definition is always aging, even though you may not see it. It's a matter of time. Therefore, if you really think about it, how could it really be giving you security? And unconsciously, I think everybody knows it. That's why we are full of fear. To conclude with the story with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, which always, in my mind, captures this so well, when the gun was pointed to his head by the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, by the Jewish communists, who were the worst anti-Semites. And they said to him in Yiddish, this gun has changed many people's mind. They were trying to get him to cooperate. And he answered, unbelievable answer. He looked at the guy in his eyes and said, this toy, tzatzke, that's what he called it. This tzatzke could frighten someone that has one world and many gods, but not someone who has one God and many worlds. That's the story. It's like investments, diversification. You have one world, the material world, so of course a gun is going to frighten you, because it's all over after that. And the Rebbe was saying basically, not that he was embracing death, but you can't frighten someone that has many worlds, because you take away my world here, I have another world, and there's another spiritual world, and my soul goes on, and I have one God, and that cannot frighten me. So in other words, it's really understanding where real security comes from. Now, no one should ever have to rely on such a test, but sometimes that's where you see it. Under the gun, literally, no pun intended. That's when you see so we don't have to wait for these challenging moments. We have to look at things very soberly at the world around us and recognize and realize self-esteem is the domain of the soul, because it's connected to a source that is forever. The material world and materialism and the body can never give you such security. It can make your life comfortable, and you could have momentary pleasures, and you could have even long-term, but it's not permanent. So someone will say, you know what, I don't care if it's not permanent, at least temporary, I feel good. Okay, fine, that's your business. But if you want to put away things, that's fine when things are going fine. When things are not going fine, suddenly this temporary becomes not something that's very valuable, and then the only thing that works is the permanent. Because we live in a world where we can get away with the candies and the distractions. I'm not suggesting we can't. But what does the wise person do? Always knows there's an underlying foundation. So what I'm here to tell you is that you have all the self-esteem you need, whether you know it or not. It's just a question whether you can access it. And accessing it is by being more soulful. Simply doing things that are not materialistic. And that is, whether it's a Shabbat, where you focus on the soul, whether it's studying, whether it's going to a class, whether it's being charitable and giving instead of taking. Taking is a very materialistic thing. Giving is a very spiritual thing. You know, secure people like to give. Insecure people are busy taking because they're always looking to hoard, to find security blankets. They're looking for another teddy bear to nurture themselves. Very secure people, by all means, I have much to give. They don't feel lessened by giving. A weak person feels lessened. If I give you, I'll have less. But that's the rule of the material world. The rule of the spiritual world is ner madlik miner. A flame lights another flame. It doesn't get weaker, it gets stronger. Because now there are more flames in the world. More light. And flames join together. So, maybe this is an epiphany that you discovered tonight, that you have all the self-esteem. Don't get arrogant about it, obviously. But you have all the tools you need. You have to find people that support that. People who believe in you. The worst thing is to have friends, quote unquote, or colleagues that always telling you that you can't do this, you can't do that. Another reminder that how weak you are or how delusional you are. You need people who are friends who support, who will tell you, you know what, dream, because it's great to dream. You know, dare yourself to do something greater. Challenge yourself. Go out of your comfort zone. Do something beyond what you've done till now. That's the people you want around in your life. And people, we tend to be able to, we can give each other such strength. And when you get more of it, you become more and more, confidence breeds confidence. And insecurity breeds insecurity. I want to end on the other note. Confidence breeds confidence. We should end the Simon B'Tov on the positive side. So, everyone should have a very confident, secure, and life and week. And if you need another dose of this, I'll be back Wednesday to continue this theme. And meanwhile, you could always watch it on video. It's recorded, etc. Be in touch with us. We have all kinds of different things happening. I'm starting to do a lot more videos lately and more. Stay tuned. Stay warm. But I think if you leave this room tonight with a inner confidence, you'll feel warm even in the chill out there. Keep your coat on just in case, but but it also helps to have warmth coming from within and the soul and the spirit. And so until next Wednesday, and again, the class was dedicated by these screensavers. They make me laugh. Okay. Dedicated in honor of Chaim, Sarah, Hillel, Isaac, and Simon Caputo. Philip, I believe, is giving his class this week. And if you haven't given us your email, please do so. And as well as if you'd like us to honor or dedicate a class, or any of your significant dates, a birthday, an anniversary, or lahavdila, yahrzeit or something, memory of a loved one, or in honor of one, please be in touch with us. We'd be happy to do that as well. And again, thank you so much. Everyone be well. Stop the other one too, yeah. So was it bad throughout? Doesn't mean necessarily.